Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of January of 2024. Today we have significant number of very interesting updates and details, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Kiev. To be more precise, we're going to talk about the Minister of Defense of United Kingdom, Grant Shapps, who was saying that since the beginning of the special military operation, not just special military operation, but since the beginning of 2014, the United Kingdom managed to train for more than 60,000 Ukrainian soldiers. And he also added that United Kingdom is going to continue this process. This very important note when talking about the current situation on the eve before the Russian the second offensive operation somewhere in the territory of Ukraine. And this is the very important signal after the Ukrainians signed the security agreement with United Kingdom. But this is not the most important update, because this is just a small thing in the batch of different events that came from the Western countries. For example, today we got very interesting update from Poland, from Warsaw. Official Warsaw says that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs reported that they are ready to provide the Polish territory for deployment of German forces. And this is very important because these things is taking place right before possible Russian offensive operation. And another important thing is coming from Germany. The Germany authorities published the plan of possible Russian invasion in Baltic states after if Ukrainians would be defeated on the territory of Ukraine. The Germans are saying that the Russians, after they managed to establish control over Ukraine, will attack the Baltic states. They will try to connect the Kaliningrad region with the mainland, or at least with Belarus. That there are going to be very heavy clashes. The Western sources are saying that during this period of time, the United States of America is going to have a lot of problems in the political sphere. I'm talking about the president elections. So the United States of America would not be able to get involved in this situation very fast. So it's like a small game, a small scenario that the German authorities try to develop and try to show that they're also involved in this game, and they will support United Kingdom, United States in war with Russia. You know that this situation reminds me one thing. This situation, all these posts from Poland, from Germany, from United States of America, from United Kingdom, reminds me the situation in Ukraine in December of 2024 and January and February of 2022, when the Western countries were doing everything they could, everything at the best, trying to force the Russians to stop, not to launch offensive operation, not to launch special military operation. They were trying to get them scared, they're pressing them, they're making sanctions and so on. Now we see the same story, and these two patterns tells me just one thing: that the Russians do have planned to start offensive operation, that the Russians do have planned to invade in Ukraine once again. The only question everybody has, where exactly the Russians are going to do this, because as I understand, neither Western intelligence, Ukrainian nor Ukrainian knows where exactly the Russians are planning to launch their attack, and that's why they're so loud. They're so loud just because of this. But also, this is not the only important update, and probably this is just the noise around the possible Russian second invasion in Ukraine. The most important update, at least according to my opinion, is coming from Moscow. According to information we have today, the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation had a conversation with the Ministry of Defense of Iran. They were talking a lot. As you can see, the post is very big. There are a lot of water in this post, nothing special and so on. So let's say 95% of this post has just regular and useless information, and just 5% tell us a lot, tell us so many information. So I was shocked when I first read this article. First of all, the Russians and Iran confirmed that they support and that they will not just support, they recognize and support each independence. So the Russian is independent state and Iran is independent state. Furthermore, as usually, they reported that either the Russians and Iranians support and confirm each territory integrity. So you might say that this is just a regular thing. So what is the difference with the previous, let's say, talks and conversations? And the thing is that in the last statement, the Russians added that these two, let's say, things like territory integrity and independence will be applied and will be signed by very big contract or agreement between these two countries. So if translate these things to you into language that we can understand, basically the Russians are saying to Iranians, so we have territory integrity, you have territory integrity. Our territory integrity, the Russians are saying, means that Crimea, Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson are the parts of Russian Federation, and you are going to sign that if anybody will attack the territory of Crimea or Donbass or Kherson of Western countries, you will start fighting on our side. So this is, let's say, the first note about the preparation or the final stage of preparation of defense agreement between Russia and Iran. This is going to be new alliance, not just like we have the Organization of Collective Security that Russia has with Belarus, Kazakhstan. This is going to be completely different agreement between Russia and Iran. Russia will support Iran if anybody attacks Iran, and Iran will support Russia if anybody attacks the territory that belongs to Russia according to the territory integrity that will be described obviously in this document. And this situation, of course, is going to change a lot. This is going to change a lot, and basically on the psycho level, on the minds level, it will change the minds of the people and understanding that everything is not so simple. Russia is not alone. There are she has a lot of allies, and not just Iran. There are a lot of countries around Russia, so the situation may be very difficult. Furthermore, we know that the United States of America has a lot of problems, but once again, let's few more words about possible Russian offensive operation. From one side, we see that the Western countries are saying that Russia don't attack Russia, will make more sanctions, we will support Ukraine no more regarding anything. Poland will allow redeployment of forces and many other things. You need to understand one thing, that the one thing that the Western countries wants more than everything is the beginning of the Russian second invasion. So from one side, we see that they're completely opposite on the, let's say, when talking about the real things they do. But when talking about their minds, they understand that the second Russian invasion is the best thing they can afford themselves in 2024. I explain to you why. Let's assume that the Russians will take a decision to attack, let's say, in the direction of Chernihiv and Sumy. And let's assume that as a result of the second Russian invasion, the Russians are able to establish control, let's say, over this territory. What does it mean for the Western countries? Probably nothing will be changed for them, but in their parliaments, in the United Kingdom, in Germany, in Poland, they will be able to get more funding for the military sector of economy, and they will be able to, first of all, earn more money and to send more money to Ukraine. But this is not the main side that will get the main benefits. There is just one side who will get the biggest benefits of the second Russian invasion. And of course, I'm talking about Joe Biden. He has a lot of problems in the United States of America. The Republicans are not allowing him to, let's say, to get funding for Ukraine. And now he can't do anything. Democrats can't do anything. And just imagine yourself if the Russians launched this second attack, started second invasion, and as a result of this invasion, the Russians established significant control over significant territories. Joe Biden will have possibilities to blame everything Republicans, and after that he will get everything he can. First of all, he will be able to remove all his, let's say, competitors like Donald Trump and many others. He will obviously win the president elections in the United States of America, and the most important, he will get funding for war in Ukraine, and this funding is going to be very big. Furthermore, the Western countries will be able to completely arrest and to take Russian assets, $300 billion. They will spend everything on the weapon. And when talking about support from UK, Germany and Poland, it's not something that the Russians are afraid of. But when talking about the United States of America, and if the Russians start the second invasion, obviously by the beginning of the summer, the Ukrainians will get F-16s, Abrams, Atakams, HIMARS, and the different types of weapon, cluster rounds, everything they want, not just rifles and, let's say, I don't know what else the Ukrainians need. Now we are moving to the situation on the ground. and we have lots of very interesting details and interesting information. When talking about Kupiansk direction, there are no changes on this area, just a few geolocated videos how the Russians managed to discover and to destroy this or that another Ukrainian position. Nothing special, just artillery duels. Maybe something interesting is going to start somewhere in the vicinity of Kislovka-Kotlarovka. On this video, probably for the first time since the beginning of this year, we received the geolocated video how the Russians were bombing the main Ukrainian supply roads that were heading inside of the village, and the Russians were bombing this territory with Stolt flamethrower system. Maybe this is the edge Ukrainian positions, and the Russians were trying to just to destroy these positions as much as possible, and then they're going to attack something like this. For now, we don't have like the information. Let's wait, and we're going to receive more. When talking to the central Kupiansk direction, the Russian sources reported that Ukrainians started concentration process of forces and reserves of 103rd Territory Defense Brigade, somewhere in the vicinity of the city of Stelmakhovka, Rozovka, and Kalamychiha, so on this line. And the reason of this concentration is unknown, but very likely that the Russians are planning to start their offensive, the second invasion, very soon. And because of the fact that Ukrainians don't know exactly where exactly the Russians are planning to attack, so that's why they just try to be on the safe side, and they try to secure the weakest positions or the weakest places in defense, because very likely that the Russians have possibilities and can attack in direction of Barova, which will allow to cut this territory into pieces and then to handle with every single one separately. When talking about Liman, we have just few adjustments according to the Russian sources. As a result of clashes, they managed to improve their positions somewhere in the vicinity of Tarskoye Salient. So by Russians, this territory is under their control, but also by the same Russians, they haven't managed to achieve the results you can see right now in front of your screen on the map. And according to some Russians, this territory is either in the gray zone or at least under Ukrainian control. For now, we're not going to change the map because these sources that provided this information is not 100% reliable. Now we are moving to Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. We have also interesting details and updates. According to information we have, the Russians concentrated around 80,000 army in this area, and the Russians are keeping pressure, and they're moving Ukrainians further to the Canal Seversky Donetsk-Donbass. The Ukrainians are losing this battle very slowly but step by step, and as you can see, this is the second area of possible Russian attack. The first one was in the vicinity in the Kupiansk. This is Bakhmut, the second one, but once again, I don't think that the Russians are planning to repeat the same story as the Ukrainians did in Robotyne. The next phase of a special military operation, nobody is going to repeat the same mistakes of 2022 and 2023. I'm talking about rushes against the defense belts, which leads just for few meters progress with the losses of hundreds of soldiers and dozens of armored vehicles. Maybe this is the reason we were talking yesterday about new Russian tactics with helicopters, with marines that they're going to, with air assault, airborne marines. Probably very likely that the Russians are going to use these also in the future, but now they're continuing on the footholds they have. On this video we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions in Kalinovka in the vicinity of Bogdanovka. So the offensive operation from the Russian side continues, but for the previous 3 or 4 days we haven't received even a single geolocated update telling us that the Russians managed to advance or to get some foothold and so on. Now we are moving to Konstantinovka. Once again, let's take a look at this video. On this footage we can see how the Russians, as a result of Iskander strike, or maybe not Iskander but Kim Skander strike, managed to destroy another Ukrainian ammo depot. As you can see, the Russians start using ballistic missiles very much. Lots of geolocated videos we received just during the previous few days, which confirms the use not just of Russian ballistic missiles but probably of other countries, and you know what I'm talking about. Now we are moving to Avdiivka. The situation is in this area remains stable when talking about the combat line. Neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians can do any advances, just the clashes along the combat line. The Russians are destroying, or were destroying, the Ukrainian armored vehicles that were involved in battle for Stepova, those that discovered themselves during the battle in the western part of the village. The Ukrainians are bombing and attacking the Russian infantry inside of Stepova, which confirms the Russian control over the village, and the Russian Russians increased their activity on the southern part of industrial area. If we increase once again the number of updates since the beginning of January, we see the heavy Russian concentration, and we don't see even a single response from the Ukrainian side. Today was published another video how the Russians using heavy artillery system were trying to destroy and to let's say break the Ukrainian defense belt, another Ukrainian stronghold somewhere in the vicinity of the industrial zone. Probably this is something like artillery preparation, and probably the next step is to launch the ground operation, and very likely within the next few days we're going to receive first updates of clashes for this stronghold. As you can see, according to military summary map, this territory is under Russian control, so that's why the map will be adjusted. Obviously this stronghold wasn't captured by the Russians during the battle for industrial area. And now we are moving further to Первомайская area. We got also geolocation. The clashes on this direction continues. The Russians managed to discover another Ukrainian armored vehicle that Ukrainians were trying to evacuate with another armored vehicle, but at some point they realized that now they are being hunted by the Russian FPV drones, and they took a decision to run away as fast as possible, and they left, abandoned once again armored vehicle, which was later destroyed as a result of FPV drone strikes. No changes on the ground in the vicinity of Первомайская. Now we are moving to Marinka area, Kurakhova. The Russians continue storming process of this territory. They are bombing this territory heavily. We got geolocated video how the Ukrainians were bombing the edge positions of the Russians in the vicinity of the church, which confirms the Russian progress. And obviously the Russians continue pressure further on the northern part of Georgievka in direction of the this same village on the top side of Osikovo water reservoir, and obviously the Russians are trying to bypass the main stronghold and to attack this area from the southwest as well. Some mappers have already updated their maps showing this territory, the northern part and the southern part, let's say accordingly, under complete Russian control. But once again, we still haven't received a single geolocated video whether the Russians managed to bypass this stronghold. But this, all these fortifications, all these strongholds doesn't, let's say, the Russians continue bombing this territory with a very heavy weapon. For example, on this video we can see how the Russians were using TOS flamethrower system. They were bombing the Ukrainian positions in Georgievka. Obviously nothing can survive after such a heavy fire, so maybe we need to expect during the next few days more updates about further Russian progress in direction of Kurakhova. We have already discussed a lot of front lines, but the most important one, of course, is Novomikhailivka, where the genius Russian general is trying to establish control, block, and to capture as much as possible. The Russians continue their very interesting, very smart, as I understand, offensive operation. The Russians have already completed and established and made lots of things for successful, let's say, finish of battle for Novomikhailivka. They have already half encircled Novomikhailivka from the south and from the southeast. The Russians continue advancing on the northeast, and very likely very soon we're going to receive more updates about further Russian progress and some, let's say, more details about some half encirclement from the north and northeast. But the most important updates is coming from the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians are saying that the situation is critical. The Russians are getting closer and closer to the day when they will establish full control over the village. And if you remember, during the previous days we were talking a lot about these fields. Say some mappers have already updated their maps showing that these territories under complete Russian control, or at least the Ukrainians were forced to withdraw their positions. And today we got the first geolocations of Russian clashes in this area. For example, on this video we can see the attempts of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade of Ukrainian forces to counterattack the Russian positions, and that attack was repelled by the Russians, and the entire Ukrainian let's say assault platoon was destroyed during the battle for these trenches. So this is the first geolocated video confirming the Russian progress, and right before the next video we will update this map and show this territory under complete Russian control. So basically now we have the right to change the color, at least over this territory, and this is very important because according to the video the situation was like following. the Ukrainians were moving from the stronghold that located on the north to the south somewhere till this area. After that, they turned in direction of Russian positions and moved a few hundred meters to the Russian forces. So the Ukrainian personnel carrier was moving something like this. Somewhere in this area, the Ukrainian infantry landed on the ground and they started their ground operation, and they were trying to storm the Russian trenches. The first squad of Ukrainian forces established control somewhere among the fields in this area, and from these positions on the ground they established fire control over the main, let's say over over Russian forces in the trenches, and their main purpose of them was not to allow the Russians to raise their heads. The second Ukrainian group started moving from the north. Let's say they moved to the corner of the trenches, and they were trying to move along this tree line to the south. But somewhere in this area, the Russians managed to stabilize the front line, and basically they repelled the attack, and most of the Ukrainian squad was destroyed, or some of them were captured and become prisoners of war. So this is the first geolocate confirmation of Russian progress. And as we discussed in the previous videos, there is some interesting, let's say, the difficulties with the barriers, with the terrain. As you know, there is a river in this area, and as you can see, the Ukrainians were attacking on the edge position of this water, of this river. So once again, if the Russians are able to continue offensive operation, and if the Russians are able to advance and to establish control, let's say, over the next square of fields, something like this, if the Russians are able to do this, and if the Russians are able to dig in deeper on the north and on the flank positions like this, which will block any Ukrainian attempt to attack from the north, then the Russians will have significant possibilities and almost no barriers from the Ukrainian side to continue offensive operation along the road between Slatka, Solotka and Vadiana. And as I understand, this is exactly what the Russians are trying to do. While the Russians are trying to solve the problems and to get the tactical advantage on the northern part of Novomikhailivka, and they are trying to get some tactical advances and results on the southern part as well. I would like to point your attention once again to the village by the name of Petrovskaya, this one. If you increase the numbers of updates since the beginning of the month, we see the concentration of Ukrainian fire. And as you can see, according to these geolocations, this area is located right in the middle between three sectors of Russian activity. And this is the first sector of Russian activity, because recently the Russian attacks between Staromayorsk and Novodonetsk has been intensified. Also, we have another area of activity is Prichistovka, Evgenievka, Shevchenko, and the third area of activity is the Novomikhailivka, of course. So as I understand from this tactical point, from this tactical area, the Russians try to coordinate and to run the entire operation in South Donetsk direction, and this is the reason of Ukraine concentration of fire. So we'll see what is going to be next, but obviously regarding the entire global Russian plan about the second invasion or their attacks in other directions, obviously we understand that sooner or later South Donetsk direction will start giving Russian a lot of benefits, because this is the only city where the Russians had losses is Ugledar. On Vremivka tactical bridgehead, on Novomikhailivka, the Russians are advancing, and they're acting very professional from military perspective. Now we are moving to the Zaporozhye area. We have probably one important update is another geolocated video of strike of FPV drone by drone operators Babry. The Russians attacked once again almost inside of the village. This is the second video in a row. Yesterday we got the explosion inside of the village. Now this is on the outskirts of the village. This is the second confirmation of the fact that the battle for Robotyne has already started. The second battle for Robotyne. But now the Russians are offensive state and the Ukrainians are trying to defend themselves. Now we are moving to Kherson direction. We continue receiving updates and details from this territory. The Russians just for the previous 24 hours published an additional 4 geolocated videos of FPV drone strikes against different types of Ukrainian weapon. On this video we can see a Ukrainian personnel carrier that was damaged and destroyed as a result of Lancet strike. We're gonna see Lancet from the bottom. A little bit to the southwest we got another video how the Russians managed to discover Ukrainian artillery system, and then as a result of Lancet strike that system was destroyed. A little bit to the south from this position we got another Lancet strike where another Ukrainian, maybe a temporary position or ammo depot, was destroyed as a strike of another Lancet that probably was a part of swarm. So it's very difficult to understand when we can see just updates for one day. For such analysis we need to increase the number of updates since the beginning of months, and this will give us the better picture of the critical situation of the Ukrainians on the Ukrainian bank of Dnipro River. Significant number of geolocations, significant number of strikes, FABs, Iskanders, I don't know, different types of ballistic missiles, Lancet, artillery, Krasnopol, multi-launch rocket systems, FPV drones. The Ukrainians probably are issuing losses on this bank of the river, and their losses are much heavier even in comparison with Krynki, because in Krynki they are losing just infantry, maybe sometimes not so important and experienced. But when talking about the cities in the vicinity of Tyaginka, the Ukrainians are losing very important and expensive artillery systems, boats, I don't know, tanks, Bradleys, personnel carriers, warehouses. So this battle is getting and becoming a nightmare, not just for the Ukrainian soldiers in Krynki, but for the entire front line. Furthermore, if we're moving to Krynki, we're gonna see a terrible video. This is the end of the story of Krynki. This is the end of the battle for Krynki. On this video we can see how the Russians were filming the situation along the river. You need to pay attention to the ice. As you can see, the rivers that goes to Krynki, this is not Dnipro, this is the rivers that goes between islands, are covered with ice. And if they are not covered with ice, we see that this is like ice barriers. The Ukrainian boats don't have possibilities to reach the shore, to reach the bank and to land the infantry. These boats let's say these icebergs doesn't allow them to move closer. As you can see on this video, the Ukrainian boat stuck basically between these things, and they can't move further. They just stuck on the surface of the water, and basically the Russians dropped grenades, and the Ukrainians lost not just one boat during those days. So this is the best time for the Russians to finish the question of Krynki, and very likely they're going to do this maybe even during the next few weeks, or even days, not even weeks, maybe even hours. And we will finish the video with the final updates regarding the situation with Russian aircrafts. Today the Ukrainian sources reported that they managed to shoot down 2 Russian airplanes of A-50 and Il-22, and they were saying that they managed to do this with their air defense systems like Patriots. Later the Russians reported that probably this information is correct, but this evening we got the first footage, the first evidence that at least Il-22, the Russian pilots, managed to land on the mainland, and that yes, this plane was damaged, but the crew and the personnel managed to survive, and nothing happened to the ship, to this plane, to this aircraft. Of course, the Russians lost 850. This is like $300 million system, but this is the war. What did they expect? And that's it for this video. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.